The headlights swept over the service road just before dawn and froze on a car resting nose down in a shallow ditch on the edge of Vidor. A patrol officer slowed, expecting another late-night driver drifting off the pavement. But the moment he approached the driver's window, he knew something was wrong. The woman behind the wheel sat too straight, too still, her hands relaxed at her sides as if posed. Two soft drinks sat upright in the console, straws in place, lids tight, not a drop spilled. Nothing inside the car looked touched by impact. Nothing looked like a crash at all. The woman was Kathy Page, 34 years old, a mother of two daughters, 12 and 7. She had spent the past several months separated from her husband, Steve Page, after more than a decade of a marriage worn down by arguments, suspicion, and long stretches of cold silence. The separation forced them into a strained truce, shared childcare, shared routines, shared space when necessary, but little else. Kathy was trying to move forward. Steve wanted to maintain control. That tension shaped every exchange between them. The night before she was found, Kathy got dressed, put on makeup, and told Steve she needed him to watch the girls. She said she planned to meet a girlfriend in Beaumont. Steve later claimed he arrived at her house while she prepared, watched her leave near midnight, and went to bed assuming everything was ordinary. By sunrise, that story had collapsed. The car had come to rest only a short distance from Kathy's home. Officers noted immediately that the ditch was shallow, the front bumper lightly pressed into soft earth, the angle gentle enough that a living driver would have been able to correct or climb out. The seatbelt hung unused. Kathy's feet weren't reaching for pedals or braced from a jolt. They were tucked neatly back, as if moved by someone who didn't care how real an accident should look. There were no skid marks, no signs of panic, no broken glass scattered across the dashboard. The scene felt artificially quiet, untouched by the violence that accompanies real crashes. At the autopsy table, the truth emerged with finality. Kathy had been strangled. Her nose was broken. There were bloodstains on her underwear and on her skin, but her outer clothing showed none of it. Someone had cleaned her. Someone had redressed her. Someone had carried her body and placed her into the driver's seat. The ditch was not the place she died. It was merely the place her killer left her. Detectives followed her last movements. Kathy had not met the girlfriend she told Steve about. She had been seeing a man in Beaumont. That boyfriend walked into the police station voluntarily, cooperated, answered every question, and offered to take a polygraph. The autopsy confirmed Kathy had sex shortly before her death. But there was a critical detail detectives focused on. Investigators believed the man she had been intimate with had undergone a vasectomy. The boyfriend had not. Steve Page had. When questioned, Steve admitted he and Kathy had sex but insisted it occurred earlier in the evening, before she left the house. Kathy's sister said this wasn't true. Kathy's father said it wasn't true. To them, that one contradiction, combined with the staged vehicle, the proximity to her home, and the sudden breakdown of her night, was the crack in the story that revealed everything underneath. Police believed the accident scene had been staged to mislead them. They believed Kathy had been killed somewhere else, that her body had been washed, clothed, and positioned in her car, and that the ditch served as the final prop in a cover story meant to survive only long enough for someone to slip beyond suspicion. But suspicion alone couldn't advance the case. No matter how tightly the investigation circled Steve, prosecutors refused to bring charges. Grand juries reviewed the evidence multiple times and declined to indict. The case froze. Kathy's father, unwilling to let his daughter become another unsolved name on a shelf, began building signs and later full-sized billboards along Interstate 10. They accused authorities of failing her. They pointed directly at the man he believed killed her. The billboards became a landmark, seen by commuters, truck drivers, tourists, and reporters. They kept the case alive when the legal system seemed determined to bury it under procedure and silence. They became such a permanent fixture of the landscape that people who had never met Kathy could recite the words from memory. The family pursued a civil lawsuit, and in that venue, they found the only verdict they would ever receive. A jury ruled Steve Page liable for Kathy's wrongful death and awarded damages. The ruling didn't put anyone in prison, didn't open a criminal case, and didn't bring handcuffs. But it was a public acknowledgement that, under a different standard of proof, the evidence pointed directly at him. Pain deepened when authorities later obtained video showing Steve vandalizing Kathy's grave, kicking over flowers on her headstone. He was convicted and fined. For Kathy's family, it felt like a final confirmation of contempt, proof that the respect he professed publicly did not match the truth of how he treated her memory. Years passed, then decades. Advances in forensic technology renewed investigative efforts. Detectives pulled old evidence from storage, reviewed witness statements, re-examined physical material, and retested DNA with methods unavailable in the early 90s. They confirmed they had biological samples from the original investigation. They gained new information. Still, no arrest followed. A reward for information grew into the tens of thousands, drawing in tips from people who remembered late-night movements, unfamiliar vehicles, fragments of conversation, or things they once dismissed as insignificant. None produced the breakthrough needed to carry the case into a courtroom. And yet the truth about what happened to Kathy Page has never been uncertain. She was strangled. She was cleaned. She was redressed. She was placed behind the wheel of her car. The scene was staged. The timeline was falsified. These facts have remained unchanged since the day her autopsy was completed. What remains hidden is the identity of the person who performed those acts, and why a system built to uncover the truth has allowed the case to drift without resolution for more than 30 years. Kathy Page's story endures because it never finished. It sits in the same limbo where it began: a car in a ditch, a woman who never made it back home, and a family who has carried the weight of a truth the courts never acknowledged. Someone killed her. Someone staged the scene. And someone has lived for decades without ever being held accountable. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories, if you dare.